We're back here at WHIP Radio in Philadelphia. Again, you're ready for a Monday Night Football matchup between the Eagles and the Panthers. Eagles sit at 6-2, and they suffered some injuries last week in a win down south in Houston. Now joining us on the hotline is the TV play-by-play voice of Monday Night Football, and that's Mike Tirico. Mike, Zach Gelb here in Philly. How are you?
Hi, Zach. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I appreciate you giving us a few minutes today. And I actually know that you live in Michigan right now, and I'm heading to Michigan in 2 weeks to catch some Michigan football up against Maryland. Do you have a good place to eat in Michigan that I could sample at when I'm down in Ann Arbor?
There are plenty. Ann Arbor, per capita, is actually one of the better restaurant towns in America. And almost anything you want, college-type hangouts, very significant variety of different types of food. Good restaurants as well. It's a pretty good city for a college town. So among the places I travel, I'd say my hometown city is just fine for keeping your belly full and keeping your appetite options pretty strong.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I went there last year when they played Nebraska. I have two good friends that go to Michigan now, so it's always a treat to go to Ann Arbor. And I know that you're coming to Philadelphia this weekend. Do you get a cheesesteak when you're in Philadelphia?
You know, my son and I were in Philly for a soccer tournament last spring when we hit Pat's and Geno's, did the doubleheader, so I introduced him to the options that are available there in Philadelphia, his own personal taste test.
Well, my Spider 2Y banana of cheesesteaks, that's my favorite play in the NFL, so I'll give you my favorite cheesesteak. It's this place called Mama's in Bella Cynwyd. You definitely got to try it out. It's a nice, big, meaty cheesesteak.
Oh, pretty good. And hard script cheesesteak. Cheese, meat, bread, all good.
We're talking to the TV play-by-play voice of Monday Night Football, and that's Mike Tirico. Zach Gelb here with you on WHIP Radio in Philadelphia. Eagles are in an interesting spot. They sit at 6-2. Nick Foles has been inconsistent this year. He has that collarbone injury, and he's going to be out from about 5 to 7 weeks. You look at Mark Sanchez. We all know his background. Got the Jets the 2 AFC Conference Championship games, and then had a falling out with the Jets. They took away some of his pieces in an Alan Faneca, Thomas Jones, and he had the butt fumble and all that great stuff. How does Sanchez fit in with this Eagles offense under Chip Kelly?
Well, we saw a little bit in the preseason. He looked pretty good when he played for Philadelphia in the preseason, to be honest, back. And then we've had the sample of the second half of the game in Houston. He looked good for a guy who had not played a meaningful snap, regular season meaningful snap, since December of 2012. I've always liked Sanchez as a quarterback. I think he was not supported very well in New York. And I think this is a offense and quarterback-friendly type system. So given what he has done over his career and his fit, and plus his perspective of the survival in New York, I think Mark might do well here if he can stay healthy with Philadelphia.
We all know a quarterback's best friend is a good run game, and the Eagles have LaShawn McCoy, Darren Sproles, who's been an Energizer bunny for this team coming over from New Orleans. Up against Arizona, the Eagles threw the ball 60-something times and only ran it 25 times. I would imagine they go a little bit more through the ground this week up against a Carolina team.
Well, a lot of people are struggling running against Arizona, so sometimes you get games like that, and they're going based on what they see from their best week-to-week survival. I don't think Chip likes to run the ball. Chip likes to take advantage of what is out there, given the opponent, what's available to them. And I think for this team, that week, that was what was the most available option. I don't think you'll see a team that's going to look to throw it 60 times a game with Sanchez, or even for the most part with Nick Foles. The game called for that more than anything else in my opinion.
And this Eagles offensive line, they've been decimated with injuries. Mathis has been in and out all year. So is Kelsey. Hermans is going to miss the rest of the season. They got Kelsey back last week, and now and then you have Mathis come off that temporary IR. How important is that with implementing a new quarterback in Mark Sanchez to get those offensive linemen healthy, as it looks like they will be for this week?
Well, it's huge for Sanchez. It's probably the reason Sanchez is playing, and not Foles. Offensive lines, you look at the successful ones, and those are the ones that are not just quality players, but healthy and intact. Go back to last year when the same offensive line played all season for Philadelphia, from the OTAs through preseason, all the way through the regular season and the playoff game. So that's the lifeblood of a team. You know, there are no fantasy leagues for offensive lines or defensive lines, and there's no fantasy league for net punting. But I always have thought that people really wanted to take fantasy football to the next level and separate the good, smart football folks, much like you drafted defenses and special teams units and have that count. I would draft offensive lines where you give points and success based on your running yards and subtract for sacks that are taken, and certainly with the metrics now, the number of times quarterbacks are hit is in there as well. But I would put that as an added metric to a fantasy team. You have to draft an offensive line where Dallas's team would have been very valuable for the first part of the season. It just gets back to the point. We don't talk about that very often, but I think that's the lifeblood to a team. And for Philadelphia, keeping this group healthy will be a big determinant in its success the second half of the year.
That's a very compelling idea. I never thought of implementing a offense alignment into fantasy football. It seems like you're a fantasy football player. Do you have a fantasy football team? Do your kids have one?
You know what? We do one. My son and I do one with other dads and sons right around our neighborhood, his school buddies, and we have a lot of fun with that. Dads will play against the dads will play against the other kids, and so on. It's a good way to stay connected with our boys and have some fun along the way. I'm not a huge fantasy football player. I don't put more than 5 minutes into it per week to set a lineup. I'm not living on the waiver wires. I just do it to just enjoy it and stay involved. But I know a lot of folks do it. I know a lot of folks, especially on Monday nights, are interested in fantasy football because it's the determining factor in a win or a loss for a lot of their leagues, a lot of the games in their leagues. Because you have a big player like a Cam Newton or a LaShawn McCoy this week involved. So I try to just keep up with it, and I've always thought that it would be a great wrinkle to it if you had an offensive line, even if you broke down the defenses into adding a defensive line component where you had the rush yards per carry given up by a team, any forced fumbles, things like that. If you really wanted to get it more involved in football, and while some folks bristle at fantasy football vis-a-vis the way you grew up watching teams, I think it's been great because a lot of the young players in fantasy football know personnel in the league, know teams in the league, know what happens, and stay close to the entirety of the league, not just the team of the division in their backyard. So I think it's been a really cool growth place for the sport and all sports really in general.
Mike Tirico is our guest. Zach Gelb here with you, WHIP Radio in Philadelphia via iHeartRadio. Eagles get set to take on the Panthers this Monday night. Mike will be on the call for Monday Night Football on ESPN. And Mike, it was a tough week for not only Eagles on an injury front on the offensive side of the ball, but also the defensive side of the ball as well. D'Amico Ryans, who calls their plays in the huddle on the defensive side of the ball, is going to be out for the year. How do the Eagles replace D'Amico Ryans? That's a tough task to do.
You just don't replace D'Amico Ryans. You can't do that. He is too good in so many different ways and provides so many things to this team that don't go down in the stat sheet. The calls he makes, the opportunity to set a defense, adjust to an audible call by a quarterback, a real great leader. And it's a linebacker position where they've lost some of their depth as well, and now they're down to, Kendricks is back, which is good. You're down to Matthews and Acho as your inside linebackers, one to play and one as your backup for both spots. That's tough. Neither player has really stepped out as a lead player over their time, so now they have to. It's going to be on those guys to play well and step up their play, really help give Philadelphia a chance to adjust to offenses on the fly, get everybody lined up, and make those plays that Ryans has made through these 3+ years as an Eagle.
Communication is such an essential part of the game of football on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball, and even special teams as well. You see how timing really does make a difference. You look at that Patriot game, it was a bad snap, and then the punter wasn't able to hold on to the ball, and the next thing you know, you had Julian Edelman running for a touchdown as the Pats took down the Broncos. When you're as a broadcaster and you're sitting in there early on in a game when a team loses a play signal caller, what do you look for from the communication front early on in the game that maybe Eagles fans will be looking at when you have a Michael Kendricks on the field or even a Mark Sanchez?
Well, the good news, let's start on the defensive side. The good news is with Kendricks, he's had a whole week to have this happen. When it happens inside of a game, as it did to Philadelphia last week, I think all bets are off. I think it's a full scramble at that point. You're hoping that person can keep it going, and you rely on the experience of Sanchez, who knows what it's like to be in a huddle and get those plays spit out and do those things. What I watch for in a game when it happens is the communication from the sideline players and then in turn to the other guys around the field. When I say sideline to the player, I mean the one who's wearing the headset. I think with Philadelphia's offense, Zach, because there's a lot of the boards and the hand signals and all the other stuff, and you never know what's live and what really matters, I think that everybody's looking over there helps the communication burden off the quarterback. Philly does that to go fast. I think you don't have a drop-off in that speed and pace of getting the messaging in when you have to change quarterbacks.
a few more questions with Mike Tirico, who joins us right now on WHIP Radio. And Mike, this is a Panthers team. They won their division last year. They had 12 wins. They took away some of the pieces from Cam Newton in the offseason. Now you have Steve Smith playing in Baltimore. And this is a team that has regressed. They sit at 3-5-1 on the year. Why do you think the Panthers have regressed so much here after coming off a year when they made the playoffs?
Yeah, well, you said it. The lineup has changed significantly. There's no comparison to the people that they had last year and the people they had this year. Let's just take the offensive side of the ball. For instance, a lot of injuries. Their left tackle, Jordan Gross, retired. Their two running backs have not been in the lineup together except for one game. Their last game against New Orleans. Steve Smith is no longer with them. They allowed Steve Smith to move on. He's in Baltimore. In large part, they were doing that so they could have the success of Cam Newton as the lead voice in the locker room and not Steve Smith. The receiving core also changed, so it's not the same. And on the defensive side, the Greg Hardy issue has been a big part of the story this year in the NFL. And without Greg Hardy, from a football standpoint, they're hurting. They miss his presence on the field. He was a difference-making pass rusher, a difference-making player in terms of lining up all over the place. And without him, it has set them back a bit. So those are the couple issues I think that have changed this team from a 12-win team to a team that they only won once in their last 7 games. And they really got to get this one to stay close to New Orleans because the Saints have a really good home schedule coming up in the next 3 weeks.
You mentioned Hardy, and there's been a lot of stuff off the field, unfortunately, for the NFL that has really centered a lot of conversations. And right now, you turn on any channel, they're talking about Adrian Peterson still and Ray Rice and the heinous acts that they did commit. But as you know, covering the league for so long, as time elapses, we wonder when those players will get back onto the field. We've seen players come back before after really going through some disgusting situations, and they've redeemed themselves. AP and Rice are on the front burner right now. Do you think they'll play it down in the National Football League this year?
Yeah, it's hard to say. With Peterson, if he does, it would obviously be if Minnesota were past the trade deadline. I don't know if they would waive him and somebody would go pick him up. I do wonder. I think it's an interesting question, Zach. I do wonder if anybody will, given the climate of what happened, what occurred. In fact, there's graphic detail in the Peterson story that really impacts a lot of folks. A lot of folks who have kids felt really disturbed by that. And on the right side, there's obviously that videotape that was out there that really changed the bar for a lot of these issues over the last 9 to 12 months. So, but not 12 weeks, I should say. So I think it's going to be very difficult for teams to accept those players coming in and playing. Now, also, they're playing running back. And we see a league that's more pass-happy than ever. So do you need a big-time running back to be a player on your team? That's not saying Adrian Peterson doesn't make you better or Ray Rice doesn't make you better. Who knows where their football readiness, their skill set is. Those are all questions I'm sure a lot of these GMs are asking, but this comes down to the owners. This isn't a player personnel guy or an offensive coordinator or a head coach saying, I really need a running back. This will come down to the owners, much like it did when Michael Vick returned after the dogfighting time that he spent in jail. Those owners will have to say, yes, our fans are willing to accept this player back as part of our team, our franchise, our community, and we want them to be a part of it. I think that's going to be a really hard sell for a lot of the owners, especially this year. Going forward, I don't know, but I think that's where I'd come down on these two things. I'd be surprised if it took place and flipped around that those guys played the NFL.
I want to hit you up on 2 more. Let's get to the Patriots. You called that Kansas City Chiefs game where the Chiefs just dominated them. And this is just how it displays how good the Pats have been over the years. They have 1 or 2 losses, and then everyone wonders if the dynasty is coming to an end. Does Brady and Belichick still have anything left in the tank? And it's very comical to hear some of the people talk about it. But there were fair points at the time. The offensive line was struggling. What has changed most with this Patriots club? Because right now they're the best team in the AFC. When you look at it a few weeks ago, people were writing them off.
Yeah, stability. I think the stabilizing of the offensive front, as you said, they were going through a lot of different parts. They actually started 2 rookie offensive linemen in that game in Kansas City against a decent front, and they just didn't play well on the defensive side. I think stability. Gronkowski wasn't really an impact player the first few weeks. He has been the last 4 or 5. Brady told us that 4th week of the season that Brandon LaFell was not there but getting close to understanding the offense and the nuances of, and that has popped up. So now Gronk's going, LaFell's going. Still have the good receiving ability of the players who had been there before, like an Edelman, even Amendola. So all these pieces started to fit back together. You know, I don't think people were wrong for questioning, is this the end of the dominant run? Nobody said New England was going to lose every game they played. I think they were right for questioning, is it the end of the dominance, simply because you can't dominate forever. You can't be 25 straight years of 10 wins or more, especially when your quarterback is getting closer to 40 than he is to 30. This will not go on forever, but what looked like it might have been a fork in the road appears not to be. But one thing we've learned in the NFL, this is the ultimate week-to-week game. It's why the ratings stay high. It's why the drama is so magnetized for fans, and it draws us in week in, week out, year in, year out. So I don't think we've determined yet who the best teams are, but New England clearly, in this quarter of the season, the October quarter of the season, to me, has taken a step above everybody else except for Arizona, who's right there with them.
Final one here with Mike Tirico, Zach Gelb here with you on WHIP Radio in Philadelphia. Since we are here at Temple University, some two former Owls have been dominating, and that's out west. Bruce Arians, you can make a case that he could have won the last 3 Coaches of the Year award, and he's the favorite this year with the job he did in Indianapolis, replacing Chuck Pagano, in addition to the job that he's been doing this year with the Cardinals team. And then you have Todd Bowles, who got fired from Philadelphia, taking over for Castillo, and that defense has been one of the tops in the league. This has been an impressive start for this Arizona team, Mike.
It has. You know, I remember Bruce coaching Temple. I was calling Syracuse games as a student way back then, and Bruce Arians has really changed and succeeded in every place he's been along the way. It's just great to see the success that he is having in Arizona, and you're refreshed by somebody who doesn't bring the same coach speak to it, who's very honest and approachable, and a heck of a good offensive coach as well. I'm excited to see that. And Todd Bowles will be a head coaching name that will come up in various circles. If you remember the players that they lost in the offseason, to me it's eye-opening that they have this opportunity defensively through the first half of the season, given the places that the people they've lost, positions and places that those guys play. It's a surprise. Bowles gets a lot of credit, so too do the players. Big Tyrann Mathieu back there with Patrick Peterson, a couple of different makers on the back end, make it tough to throw. So it goes to show you, that's a division where we all said Seattle and San Francisco, man, those teams played for the championship last year. They may have been 1 and 2 in the league last year. We'll see them again twice in the regular season, maybe in the postseason this year. And now, neither one may make the playoffs. I think they will right themselves. One of them will, but it's going to be tough for 2 to make the playoffs because they're going to play each other twice and beat each other and nick themselves up here a little bit. So Arizona has a golden opportunity in the next few weeks to put some significant distance between themselves and those 2 teams, which is something no one forecasts in the league going in.
No question about that. Mike Tirico, we appreciate a few minutes today. Thanks so much, my friend.
All right, Zach. Thanks. Good luck to you. Talk to you down the road.